Hi guys, what is up? My name is Kat, also known as Steel City Scumbag. Catch me on Insta. I am starting this podcast with my partner. It'll be sometimes together, sometimes apart, and it is called Killer Cards. Now, we are going to be pushing sort of into the true crime side of things, and I wanted to balance that out with my love of cards as well. So we are going to be focusing on killers committed a crime and go over what they did, who they are, most of their motto, and then touch base on the car they used, or the car that they didn't use, or the car that they had in their collection. We're going big name, little name. Any other suggestions, just let me know. I'm going to start it off with one of the greats, and yeah, let's get into it. So I'm going to put these out in a structure that is, we're going to talk about the person, and then we're going to talk about what they did, and then we're going to talk about their car. So we're always going to leave the car to last. So, best bit for last. Now, the first cab off the rank for me in a solo podcast is Mr. Narco Terrorist himself. Wait for it, drum roll. Pablo Escobar. Right, Mr. Pablo. So Pablo was born on the 1st of December 1949 in Rio de Janeiro, Colombia. Now, excuse me because I am extremely Australian and have horrible ochre in my voice. Now, he died on the 2nd of December 1993, aged 44. Now, he died in Medellin, or Medellin. I've looked up how to say it twice, and I've been given two different things. So I'm going to go with Medellin for now. Makes a bit more sense to me. Or Medellin. Anyway, we'll just run with it. We'll just, my spelling and reading's not that great anyway. Now, Mr. Pablo, he died from a gunshot wound. He was shot 3 times, and his most fatal shot, obviously, was through the ear, which is never a good time. So Pablo is known as Don Pablo, El Padrino, and the King of Cocaine. There are 2 more that we'll get into once we get into the story, because it's quite funny. Now, Pablo was born into a family of 7 kids. He was the 3rd. Obviously, 7 kids is a lot, man. They must not have had a TV at all. His father was a farmer, and his mother was a teacher. Old Pabi was raised in a nearby city of his birthplace called Medellin. You can see where we're going here with the Medellin cartel and as big as it got. So it's believed that Pablo started his criminal career when he was quite young, and it states in reports that he would steal gravestones. The idea was he was stealing them and then giving them back to the merchants. The merchants were grinding them down and reselling them, so it was a bit of a double-handed thing. His brother, Roberto, obviously came to the party, and you'll hear his name a lot through this account, I suppose you'd say, because he did a tell-all sort of thing. Now, he stated that it wasn't that he was stealing them, that he was hired to do it by the people that own the cemetery for unpaid and unkept fees. So a vicious cycle, really, in life and death. Other reports were made by his son later on in his tell-all that said that most of his first crime was actually producing counterfeit high school diplomas, and he did that while he was in university. So he did attend a university, but while he was there, he pretty much all he did was make counterfeit diplomas, and he actually left university without any degrees. First documented trouble that he got into was some petty street scams. So he was boosting cars, he was selling contraband cigarettes, fake-ass lottery tickets. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine buying a lottery ticket off this curly-haired kid in the street and winning, and then finding out that you got gypped twice? And he was actually caught up in all of that and and got into some trouble. That's where they first sort of started to hear his name. Early 70s, he prior to him becoming the King of Snow, I suppose you'd call it. His first good go of becoming who he is, he was working as a thief and a bodyguard for a gentleman, and it was reported he made his first 100,000 win, I suppose you'd call it, by kidnapping an executive, and obviously kept him as ransom at $100,000, and they paid it, and he released him. So it was successful all around, I suppose you'd say. He then, after that, he started gaining notoriety, and he started working with a man called Alvaro Prieto. who was a contraband smuggler, and he operated out of Medellin. Now, it's pretty funny because old Pavi, you see, he had a vision board, I suppose you'd call it. And his vision was to have $1 million Colombian in his account by the time he was 22. Obviously, with how quickly he rose to the occasion, we're pretty sure he hit that $1 million by 22. It states by the time he was 26, he had $100 million in his bank account. So not only has he one-upped it, he's got $100 million doo-doos sitting in his bank account. Old Pubby goes to the ATM, yep, $100 million. Imagine finding that on the pub floor on a Friday night. Someone's ATM slip for $100 million. Moving on, so into the family side of things, records show that about March of 76, he wanted to marry his wife, Maria Victoria Haneo. Again, I apologise for my pronunciation. Now, the only thing with that was Maria was only 15 at the time, so she was quite young, still a pup. And old Pavi was 26, pushing 27 by this stage. So, it's well, he's in his 27th year anyway. So, obviously, her parents weren't not keen. He had a bit of a reputation by then. And, well, their kid was just a kid. She was a minor, Maria didn't go much on what Mum and Dad had to say, though. And her and Pablo eloped in the same month, so in March. They went on to have 2 kids. So, firstborn was a son, Pablo, also now. They went on to have 2 kids. Firstborn was a boy. His name was Juan Pablo. He is now known as Sebastian Marroquin. And his daughter, Manuela. You won't hear much about Manuela. She's poor little bugger. She was kidnapped before. She's sort of copped it, and she's very much stayed out of the limelight, whereas old Sebastian's sort of basking in it. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard the name before. Sorry. Now, old Pablo, he was a bit of a sly dog. He went on to have many reports of infidelity, 2 of which sort of stood out and became public notice was... So in 2007, a journalist came forward and she'd published a memoir about their relationship and sort of dishes his ties to several presidents, Caribbean dictators, and high-profile politicians. So she really sort of went in deep and said about, how much they loved each other and how it was great and, they were really in for it together. Pablo had never really mentioned this woman before. There was no really report other than this, and obviously this came out in 2007, long after Pablo was gone. Now, I don't know the other woman, so... Cut forward to the other woman. I don't know if you guys, true crime guys or true crime junkies like us, have ever heard of this name. But his other lover was actually Griselda Blanco. If you do not know who that is, that she's the Black Widow. I will cover her later in this podcast. She's up there. She's got a bit going on. So yeah, she's a whole ass vibe, that girl. Now, she states that her and Pablo had a secret, illicit, but passionate relationship. And in that time, she also had a diary which was seized by officials. And she had 2 nicknames for old Pablo, and this is what I was having a bit of a giggle about before. Now, her first one was Coca de Mare, which meaning my Coke King. He is who he is. He's the king of cocaine. But the other one was Paula Blanca. Now, for all of us that, don't speak fluent, so the other one was Paula Blanca. Now, I wasn't going to elaborate on this, but I can't help not to because I get a bit of a giggle out of it. But Paula Blanca means that Pabi needed a bit of a tan on his old fella. So yeah, Paula Blanca means white cock. So yeah, that was a documented story from old Black Widow herself. Like I said, Pablo's brother has dished a lot on Pablo. He plays his life out sort of, this Robin Hood, that he rose from simplicity and obscurity to the world's most wealthiest man, and, really, really blew wind up his ass, which, as a brother should, but I kind of feel like it's not your limelight, dude. So yeah, but brothers, am I right? Now, in 1975, Pablo expanded his cocaine business and he was flying planes out of Colombia 7 times a week, mainly between Colombia and Panama, and then was pushed into smuggling. And, from Panama and onwards, it was sort of pushed into the United States. In May of 76, by this stage, he'd had his 15-year-old wife, which is a bit how you going. And him and several of his men were actually caught trying to attempt to return to Medellin from Ecuador with 18 kilograms of white paste. Now, I don't need to elaborate on that. If you don't know what that is, you probably shouldn't be listening to this anyway. At first, Pablo tried to bribe his way out of it by dangling money in front of the judges who were making the case, but they said, nah, fuck you, you're done. So after failing to bribe said judges, Pablo actually had the 2 arresting officers killed. And it was sort of a big turn of events because obviously without them, they didn't really have a case and everything was dropped. So unfortunately, poor old fucking police officers, they copped it. And yeah, that was really, well, that's when Roberto, old Bob, he sort of come into the picture and said that was really the turning point for Pablo, and he found out that obviously if bribery didn't work, murder would, and he could pay just about anyone to do what he wanted. So, that was sort of, once that was dropped, it was all go for Pablo after that. He expanded again and further. He bought 15 planes. Which included a Learjet. So, he was moving quite fast, and it's been said that, that plane would do quite a few trips. And he also bought 6 helicopters. Now, helicopters are good, but not super fast, so it's sort of 6 of one, half dozen the other of actually what he uses helicopters for. I'm thinking it's probably going to be going from island to island. But anyway, yeah, so 15 planes, 6 helicopters, including a Learjet. He's having a bit of a brag. Soon, obviously, the demand for cocaine was through the roof. It increased in the US, which led Pablo to organising more and more shipments. Different routes and distribution networks through South Florida, California, Puerto Rico, and other parts of the country. He was really pushing it in. Himself and really pushing it into the country. Himself and his co-founder, Carlos Leder, worked together to develop a new transshipment point in the Bahamas and an island called Norman Cay. It's about 350 k's from Florida. So according to old Bob, Pablo didn't purchase the island, and that was a sole venture of his of Carlos's, but Pablo did buy a lot of the land that was there from Carlos. So he did buy the airstrip. 15 planes, got to fly them somewhere. He bought a harbour, a hotel, houses, boats, more aircraft, and in this time they also built a refrigerated warehouse. Now, colour me not surprised, but you know what? Refrigerated warehouse, I can't say it'd be a bad job for old Parby. And obviously he had a cute little batch pad there as well. From 78 to 82, they used said warehouse as the main smuggling route. So obviously it was built for a reason. With massive money coming in, Pablo went on to buy land back in Antioquia. I don't think I got that right, but back pretty much where he was born. 20 square meters even for around the $7 million mark. And he built a ranch on that. He built himself a wonderland, I suppose you'd call it. And he called it, again, please don't come at me for pronunciation, Hacienda Napoles. And inside it was a fortress. It's said to contain a luxury house, a lake, sculpture garden, a private bull ring, because we all need them, and a zoo. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but tell me that you don't deal drugs when you have an exotic animal that you're probably not supposed to have. So his zoo consisted of elephants, giraffes, exotic birds, and, piece de resistance, hippos. He bought 4 hippos. In the time, just to sort of take the off-ramp here and just to add a little bit, which was hilarious when I've sort of researched this, we just jumped on the slip road and we're here. So once Pablo was gone, obviously we know he's died. This is not a suspenseful type of podcast, or this is not a suspenseful type of show. Once we know that Pablo's gone, right? So we know he's gone. Now, nobody sort of went back into his home, I suppose you'd call it, for a while. And 4 hippos turned into 16 hippos, and they were extremely territorial. So anybody that went in looking to look at the house or look at the thing, they died. So doesn't matter what you tried to do to help said hippos, they weren't having a bar of it. Now I won't tell you too much about that. There is a documentary called Cocaine Hippos. By all means, I think it's on Netflix still. Go and have a sticky peek. It's pretty good. Right, now back onto the main highway. It was also said that Pablo was, and rightly so, a little paranoid, and he had multiple safe houses everywhere he was. He was actually in one the day that he, you can get a little bit fucking trigger happy. And most of them were like sort of chockers, ready to go, ready to fire on all cylinders. Now, in 1982, Pablo decided to rot the government from the inside out, which is no great surprise, really, because when you can't control it from the outside, you control it from the inside. So he was actually elected as an alternate member of the Chamber of Representatives of Colombia as a part of the small movement called Liberal Alternative. Yep, I didn't fuck that up. I didn't pronounce it wrong. I am 100% in what I'm saying. He was elected as an alternate member of the Chamber of Representatives. Huh. Anyways, earlier in his campaign, he was a candidate for the Liberal Renewal movement, but had to jump ship as that competition was Luis Galan. Now we all know about the Galan cartel as well. And he also, obviously with Luis, he was also being supported by the Renewal movement, and it was a bit of a can't do that. So old Pablo stuck to the original. Wild, huh? Let's just go and join the government. Anyways, Pablo obviously became known internationally quite quickly about his drug network, and it was a huge notoriety, right? The Medellin cartel controlled a large portion of drugs that entered the US, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Spain. Like, he had his finger in everyone's pie. The production process was also altered, with coca from Bolivia and Peru replacing the coca from Colombia, as it was beginning to be seen as like a substandard. So not only did he supply, he upped his game every time he did. And it was sort of a big turning point, because whilst everyone thought he was on the back foot because he was just supplying stamped out shit, he was like, nah, let's go up. So he did. Now, in the thick of all of it, it is said that the cartel brought in more than $70 million a day, which is a rough yearly income of $26 billion. So every year they brought in $26 billion. And that was just this particular year that they actually listened to. They were smuggling nearly 15 tons of cocaine a day. And that's around the $500 million mark. And that was going straight to the United States of America. Another fun fact that I found while researching this was they actually were spending $1,000 a week on rubber bands. Now, I don't know anybody that's ever bought that amount of rubber bands, but that's a lot. Now, these rubber bands were strictly to use to put around cash. Now, it was, you just just I can't even contemplate how much money that is. That's a huge amount of cash. If you're spending $1,000 a week on rubber bands to then just to put it around money, there has to be a bit of a pause there, because it is reported that almost 10% of the money stored was thrown away in spoilage. So it was reported that the rats would get in and they would nibble on it and eat, and obviously urine, feces, those sorts of things. The rat was eating the rat's money. So go figure, full circle of life. But yeah, so rats, hey? Can't trust them, cunning little bastards. So this is where it starts getting a bit serious. So obviously with the way that things are going, the Medellin cartel was now seen as an enemy to the US and to the Colombian government. So old Pabi, he was sort of a bit of a natural with people. And doing so, he tried to play the whole Robin Hood to the lower socio-demographic that was in Colombia. You know, he was putting up footy fields, sports courts, and he was like sponsoring kids' football games and you know, things like that. And he was building housing developments and sort of really putting money back and giving people jobs, and, you know, like really pushing that whole, you know, like, I'm doing this for you sort of attitude. And it did work in a respect. You know, people would come looking for Pablo. People, you know, township people would say, no, you talk about, never seen the bloke in my life. They'd watch out, you know, when people are around. They would quite often, you know, let him know that they saw something suspicious and things like that. So it was sort of really, it worked in both ways. Now, at one point, drug traffickers in Medellin and other areas were handing over around about 20 to 30% of their profits to Pablo. And that was because he would ship to the US successfully. Like he never missed a beat. You know, very rarely did they get caught. Everything that he shipped usually landed and was distributed before, you know, authorities could even know that it was on the water. You know, by the time that it was on the ground, they were still looking in the water. You know, he was really moving in that respect. Like, he was on top of the game for the logistics behind it all. But with all that sort of success always comes competition, you know. You're never going to be top dog forever. And unfortunately, that meant Colombia became the murder capital of the world. So in 1991, 25,100 violent deaths were recorded. And unfortunately, in 1992, that rose to 27,100. I'm not sure why they've rounded it to 100. It seems odd that they've done that, but I can only give you the information that I've found. Now, with the increase of murder rate, it was sort of fueled behind Pablo. He was giving cash bonuses to his hitmen and to people as well to kill police. Unfortunately, during that time too, there was over 600 police deaths that were recorded in that stint as well. And it sort of really brings to light, you know, just how dangerous this man is. People were willing to kill police officers for cash bonuses, and you know, like, unfortunately in those situations money does talk. Just before 91, there was a hit put out on Luis Galan. Now, it's who I spoke about being Pablo's competition when he ran for government. Now, this triggered Cesar Gaviria to go ham on Pablo and other drug cartels in general. They did convince Pablo to hand himself in and cease all criminal activities on the say-so that they would give him, you know, extra cushy sort of sentence if he complied. And Pablo ended up surrendering himself in 1991. Pablo straight chilling in prison, didn't give a fuck about nothing. This prison had an oval, a bar, a jacuzzi, a waterfall. You know, it was the duck's guts, really. And he was doing pretty well there. He was serving his time, and then he slipped up. And it sort of came to light that he was still large and in charge. He was doing what he wanted to do, despite the bargain that he made for surrendering. This caused the government to renege and pull everything back that they'd offered. And old Pablo was supposed to make the old back to standard fucking prison. You know, you'll get your fucking couple on the bars bullshit. You know. But Pablo being Pablo, he was made aware of this, and on the 22nd of July 1992, he escaped. So the day that they were moving him to said prison, he cat on a hot tin roof and he fucked off. So he's gone, right? Gone. See you later. Round the back. Pablo he's in hiding. He's doing everything in his power to stay out of their way. But mind you, this is also the same time where you've got old Pablo fucking posing up out front of the, White House. Let's not talk about that. But so they've got the shits by this stage. They're with Pablo hiding out, the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command, consisting of SEAL Team 6 and the Delta Force, I'm pretty sure that's right, they arrived in Colombia and they're hunting for Pablo at this stage. Whilst they were there, they were starting to train the Colombian police force officers to make a task force. The task force was called Search Block, BLOC. With everything going on the official, another group of vigilantes struck up, and they were also looking for Pablo. They called themselves the Les Pepes, and Les Pepes means people that were persecuted by Pablo. So people that were affected by Pablo, they made this vigilante group, and they were also looking for him. Whilst sort of the official side of things stayed normal, the Los Pepes, they weren't mucking around. They were really out with a vengeance, and it's reported they killed nearly 300 of Pablo Escobar's associates, some relatives, and his lawyer. So his old lawyer copped it as well. Oh, and they burnt all his shit. They sort of broke into his house and did a whole heap of shit. 16 months after doing the bolt, on the 2nd of December 1993, Pablo met his maker. So it was all over for him. He was found by Search Block at one of his houses. They've raided the house, kicked the door in, started chasing Pablo. Pablo and his bodyguard, they sort of took off. They started running. They tried to escape by clambering onto the roof with all intentions of roof hopping to safety, but Pablo was shot in the leg and the chest and ultimately in the ear, which was lights out. A lot of people have said that Pablo put the bullet in his head, but documentation sort of states that, the last moments of his life, that he was already deceased when they reached him on the rooftop. Now, 25,000 people attended Pablo's funeral, and with his passing came like a swift end to the Medellin cartel. Rival cartel, the Cali cartel, took over and dominated well into the mid-90s. Escobar's wife, Maria, now widow, and the children fled Colombia in 1995. They tried but failed to find a country that would accept them for asylum. And despite Pablo being a cheating dog, Maria was really loyal to him and their marriage. So much so that once Pablo was murdered, they wanted to also kill Sebastian or Juan, and she actually went in and went to town. She negotiated, she paid money, she paid damages, everything to keep him alive, under the respect that he would no longer take in his father's footsteps, that they were completely done. And it's really affected all of their lives. Now, you can Google, obviously, Maria and Sebastian and his daughter, and sort of, well, you can't miss it. There's nothing on there about his daughter. His daughter has never opened a social media in her life. And I think she's also changed her name, but no one knows it. So, power to her. All in all, it is a pretty sad end for his family. He lived and died by his own fortune, and it really just goes to show that no money in the world can keep you safe during a gunfight. None. No amount of money will ever keep you safe. So, yeah, it is what it is, and, that's the to and fro of old Pablo. Now, most important part of this whole show. So, the car I have chosen out of Pablo's whole collection is one that stood out the most to me, and that was his 1974 Porsche 911 3-litre RSR IROC. Now, IROCs. I'll delve into that a little bit further, but so it's a Porsche. At the time of purchase, it was worth probably around $25,000. At the moment, last one that sold was 2.2 million. So, like I said, this is why I picked this one. It's super cool, super rare. It had the 911 engine, so 3-litre high butterfly flat 6 racing engine. It had a 5-speed trans, bashed up its ass. It was a coupe. Now, it did come out, the colour that it was stated that it was a Sahara beige, or as you guys call it these days, sandy taupe. This 911 RSR was one of just 15 built, 1974. It is distinguished by a large rear spoiler, blackout headlights, flush alloy wheels. Exterior is finished obviously in the Sahara beige. Features graphics displaying the original driver's name and fitted with the Porsche 935 style flat nose bodywork. Pablo raced it. Actually, it was, as I said, one of his favourites, hence why it's one of my favourites, hence why I'm picking it. Don't come at me. I'm not a huge Porsche fan, but this thing is fucking cool. So the car was sold after Pablo, initially owned by legendary US motorsport team owner Roger Penske, and raced by F1 champion Emerson Fittipaldi, I think they pronounce his name, in an inaugural international race of Champions season. The IROC was a discipline that involved racers from different categories competing in identical cars. So according to auctioneers from collecting cars, since its IROC days, the car then changed hands through a privateer racer, John Tunstall, who raced in various IMSA events, including the Daytona 24-hour and 12 hours of Sebring. The car changed hands again in the early 1990s, where it was sent to the United States to undergo a transformation back to its original bodywork. In 2011, it emerged at the Rennsport Reunion at the Laguna Seca Raceway, where it won multiple awards for its restorative work. While not the most competitively successful Porsche, the car's interesting background and sort of the owner history has prompted experts to forecast the high selling point, which is the 2.2 million. Now another IROC 911 sold for 2.3, I think it was, in 2016, at auction from Jerry Seinfeld's collection, actually. So, you know, he had one, Pablo had one, all the cool kids had one. So another question I get asked a lot about when I started this podcast was, you know, the cars that you're going to be talking about, were they used in a crime? Now, this car wasn't used in a crime per se, but it was obviously the proceeds of crime, and it was one of Pablo's favourites. So, you know, a lot of questions I do get asked too is, you know, did the person that you're reporting on, did they have, you know, a car collection? Did they have a particular car that they use? You know, which one fit the most bodies in it? You know, there's a lot that goes on behind, you know, what we sort of decided the questions would be in this category. Now, again, we've touched base. We know about the car. We know that it was proceeds of crime, not used in a crime. Now, he did have an extensive vehicle collection. A lot of them, unfortunately, were burnt by the Los Pepes, and, you know, which is super sad. In his collection, he had a 78 Renault 4. He had a 46 DeSoto, 78 Toyota Land Cruiser. He had a 72 Mercedes S600 Pullman, Porsche 935V, a 1928 Cadillac Town Car. Like, that is like the holy grail, and unfortunately it was burnt. He had a Mercedes 190 SL Roadster, 1978 Simca 1000. He had a 74 Porsche 911 RSR, a 1964 Porsche 356. He had a Renault 5. He had a Mercedes 300 SL. He also had a couple of bikes. He had a 1990 Harley Davidson. He had a Honda CR125, and he also had a Lambretta, my motorcycle. So he did have, like I said, and plus the IROC. So he had an extensive list of cars, especially an extensive list of cars to be imported into Colombia. And unfortunately, none of them, other than the IROC, really survived. A lot of these were damaged, and some of them have been lost and never found. Whilst sort of we wrap up what was Pablo Escobar, I think we can take away from it that he was an international drug lord. He was a father, he was a son, he was a brother, he was a car enthusiast. But in saying that, so our first tally of the week goes to number 1, Porsche. So first killer car of the rank is a Porsche. Not my favorite car, not my problem. I found this story super interesting to read about, to learn the other side of Pablo and his family. So I hope to see you all guys next time, and just remember, stay cool, stay on the throttle, have fun, ride bikes, save lives. Let's do this.